How much does it cost to learn how to grow your own vegetables? Can you learn to grow vegetables, save money on your grocery bill? What's the cost of containers, soil, the rest of it? How much time does it take to learn to grow? Good morning, I'm Matthew. We're the Scoops. And I'm going to give you our experience and what we've learned so far and try to kind of give some insight on cost. Now, when discussing the cost of learning how to garden and learning how to grow your own food and learning gardening in general, really, even if you're just growing flowers, I think the first thing that you're going to have to take into account is just overall size. Obviously, how much you're going to spend when you're first starting out is really going to depend on the size of gardening that you plan on doing. If you're just doing a handful of small pots because you're growing some flowers, you might be able to get away with spending less than $50. Heck, if you've got some stuff that you might be able to reuse and reclaim, it might cost you next to nothing. If you're planning on doing a larger scale garden though, again, depending on how much size you're looking at, your soil costs may be different. If you don't have any established composting, if you don't have any local soil producers that you can get soil from, all of that is going to play a factor. The other thing too is just time. Now, one thing to think about when you're dealing with the factor of time, for example, our garden that we've got going on here did not happen overnight. This is actually about a year and a half or more effort. And we did not start out the gate putting in this amount of garden space. So you can go back and look through our channel and see that we actually just started with simple stacker type pots that we picked up from Aldi's. It was like a little 3-tier system. Each tier had 3 basically pots. So, we had 9 little tiny growing spaces, and we began learning, and basically this whole journey, this whole path started with those little stackable pots. And that whole ordeal, the pots itself, I think I want to say they were like $6. And then we just used prepackaged organic gardening soil and planted, we had some rosemary in there, we had some tomato plants, and it wasn't until shortly after that we began, trying to mix our own soil and started with the grow bags. So your very first plants, I would say try to start as cheap as you can before jumping into anything larger scale. Again, a handful of pots, maybe if you're looking at vegetable gardening, maybe try your hand at, if you want to try tomatoes, I would probably go with a pepper or something to that effect. I actually have a video where we discussed my 3 recommended or 3 favorite learn to grow crops because of how fast they are. One of them is radishes. Now, radishes, of course, you're going to need a little bit larger of a growing space. Same with lettuce. We do romaine here, and we've also done leaf lettuce, and the green romaine has done exceptionally well for us here, and it's relatively quick. It doesn't take much time. So that would be one of my first deals when talking about cost. Start slow. If you start, because you're going to make mistakes, and the smaller that you start, the less impact on cost it's going to be. Now, like I said, time changes things, and you're able to grow over time. Now, where we're at now, we've probably spent way more than we should have. Again, the learning experience can be expensive. If I had to do it again, I would definitely change a few aspects. And here's a few areas. Now, like I said, we started small with the little stackable pots. But then right after that, we jumped into filling 30-gallon bags And that actually costs us way more on a couple of levels. The first is the amount of soil it takes to fill those 30-gallon bags. Now, when we first started doing that, one thing we did not do, which we do now, is what we just call it bottom filling, where you take compostable items, sticks, logs, branches, leaves. We actually use straw hay. Keep in mind, you want to make sure it's stuff that's not been sprayed. You can layer the bottom half of a container, whether you're using raised beds, whether you're using grow bags or buckets or whatever it is that you're growing in container-wise. You fill the bottom half of that, and that stuff will break down over time. And you use less soil because you're only filling the top half, or even the top third, or even top quarter, depending on how much depth you need in your soil. And so that can greatly reduce your soil cost. However, we weren't aware of that type of stuff to begin with because we were just starting out. And so filling the first, let's say 6 bags as an example, we probably actually could have filled 9 or more bags with that same amount of soil. So right off the bat, not only did the cost increase, but you could even look at it as almost a bit of a waste, but that's part of the learning process. So soil costs and the lack of knowledge regarding bottom filling and stuff was a cost. The other part was actually the size of the containers themselves. Now, like I said, we started off with 30-gallon grow bags, when in reality, I could have started off with 5-gallon grow bags, maybe even in some cases 1-gallon grow bags, which have been, just for the containers themselves, significantly cheaper. Smaller bags. Again, like I said, with the stackables and how we started with just those small pots, if you get into actually using grow bags, make sure to start small. And that's where we could have saved ourselves a lot of money. Start small and keep in mind that over time you can continue to add, and that's what we've done here. Even though we've got 30-gallon grow bags, we've got 20-gallon grow bags, and we just recently started using 5 and 10-gallon grow bags. Again, something we should have done from the get-go. So time is a cost. That is something that you need to factor in. And if you don't have the time right now to keep up with a large-scale garden, maybe you scale back a little bit. Now, with us, we're not doing that because I am a little too headstrong and I just don't want to do it. But I probably should. Now, let's talk about the final aspect here, and that's the harvest. And this is actually something that you should equate when you're talking about cost. And that comes into the form of preservation. Now, if you're still small scale like we have been, we haven't really had to really worry about preserving our harvest because the harvest has been small enough to where we've been pretty much able to keep up with just eating it as it comes. Anything that we haven't been able to eat, for the most part, we've just been kind of throwing them in the freezer, or we'll cook it up into something, and we can use that, throughout the week, or whatever the case may be. But we haven't had to really focus on long-term preservation. But you need to make sure you have a plan in place, especially once you do get to larger scale harvesting, to preserve that food, because if it goes to waste, well, that is part of your cost. I mean, the whole point of raising all this stuff and growing it is to reap the rewards, to be able to utilize it. And that is going to, of course, incur some additional costs. For example, if you're canning, now you got to buy canning equipment and canning jars and lids and things of that nature. Even if you're just going to be, like for example, broccoli, one way that you can preserve broccoli, and same with spinach, is you blanch it and you freeze it. Now, it's a small cost, but now you need freezer bags and freezer storage, things that nature. Maybe you end up having to actually buy a separate freezer, like a chest freezer or an upright. That's an additional cost. That's something that you should be keeping in mind. Proper planning can save you money, just like improper planning can cost you. So the takeaway, start small, plan properly, don't go overboard like we have here, and grow small. Don't try to just jump in. Start small, grow small, and as you expand and you do it slowly, you can focus on maybe just a couple of plants and not get overwhelmed, and you can manage that cost. So don't let anything I've said here deter you from getting started. Just know that if you start small, that impact is going to be reduced. Now, one thing I'd mentioned at the beginning of the video here is, can you grow your own food to reduce your grocery bill? And I would say that really depends. It really does. My initial answer would be no. If you've never gardened before, you have all of the setup, the initial costs of, if you're container gardening, you've got the container costs and soil costs. If you're in-ground gardening, you still have the time and labor. And there's still going to be some infrastructure like your watering and things of that nature, and you may have to bring in compost. I mean, there's so many factors that are going to be very specific to your setup, and so it's going to have some upfront costs. The other side to that is, again, if you are new to this, you may not know how to keep up with everything. Again, pruning. Companion planting is something that you should look into. There are certain plants that you really can't grow next to each other because they have the opportunity to basically smother each other, and they'll take away from the soil nutrients and things of that nature, and they'll compete to the point to where either they die or they just are real limited on what they can do and may not produce anything for you. So that's another area that you need to keep in mind. So do I think if you're a brand new gardener that you can just start growing your own vegetables? Probably not. Again, don't let that deter you from learning, because do I think that you can grow your own food? Absolutely. Do I think over time, as you learn how to preserve your harvests, learn how to actually harvest the seeds and reuse those to start generational growing, I guess you could call it? Yes, absolutely. Do I think over time that cost can be reduced? Absolutely. But do I think you can do it right off the bat? No, probably not. You're probably going to spend more. And not only that, when you first start growing your vegetables, you're still going to have to buy that food too, because you're not harvesting right away. It takes time. So keep that in mind as well, if that's why you're doing it. If it's not because of just learning how to grow and eventually grow into a system that produces for you so you can break away from this food system, things of that nature. If you're just trying to get in right off the bat to try to save money immediately, probably not the best course of action. So thank you for hanging out with me today and having a cup of coffee with me and discussing, of course, what we've learned and my takeaway from costs and what it takes financially and from your time to learn how to grow and garden. And thank you also for your support. Thank you for following us on this journey as we learn how to do this, how we learn to garden and begin trying to produce for ourselves. And thank you for joining us on this journey as a whole. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That really continues to support this channel, and just like our gardening and just like our knowledge, helps this channel to grow. And just overall, thank you. So that's going to do it for this morning. I've got a lot of stuff I need to do out here today. I'm actually going to make sure to capture that as well and share that with you. So make sure to watch out for that video as well. I'll have it up as soon as I can. Again, time, not exactly something that's on our side. Otherwise, thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.